Let's schmooze with some immigration. So on January 5th, 2023, President Biden announced he's going to be expanding a program to legally accept up to 30,000 people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, and that's going to be every month. The program allows eligible people over the age of 18 or under 18, if you're accompanied by a parent from those eligible countries, to enter the United States legally on parole and ultimately apply for work permission and future advance parole to travel back and forth to your home country and get a work permit. And this parole program is going to be valid for 2 years, but they're not going to have 30,000 people come from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela every month, and in 2 years tell them to go home. So it's going to absolutely be extended. Now, this program was also previously implemented for 100,000 Ukrainians last year fleeing the war in Ukraine. It's the same basic program. The Department of Homeland Security claims that this new parole program, the reason they did it for Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela, and Nicaragua, is going to be to provide a lawful and streamlined way for qualifying nationals from these countries, Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela, Nicaragua, obviously Ukraine last year, from entering the United States and coming even though they do not have entry documents. And it's better than trying your luck at the border or trying to cross the border illegally. Through a fully online process at uscis.gov, individuals can be considered on a case-by-case basis for advance authorization to travel to the United States and seek a temporary period of parole for up to 2 years, provided they, one, have a supporter in the United States who will provide financial and other support, two, that this supporter is a lawful resident of the United States or a United States citizen, three, this person who is applying for the parole undergoes transparent and robust security vetting, and this person meets other eligibility criteria and warrants a favorable exercise of discretion, which means that there is no skeletons in this person's closet who's coming on these parole programs. If you got skeletons in the closet, they're not going to let you in. What do I mean by skeletons? No criminal records, no fraud at the embassy, you weren't deported previously at the border, you previously didn't overstay on a visa, you're otherwise, not inadmissible to the United States. You're a good, decent, moral person. There's no skeletons in your closet that you got to be concerned about, and they'll let you in on parole. It's on a first-come, first-served basis. The Department of Homeland Security has already begun implementing this new process for Cubans, Haitians, Venezuelans, and Nicaraguans. Last year, of course, for Ukrainians as well. And people are already coming and have already entered the United States from all of these countries. Now, the Department of Homeland Security has warned individuals to complete the process electronically and that they should not approach the border to access this process, as they are going to be turned away at the border. This new process, parole process for Haitians, Cubans, Venezuelans, and Ukrainians, it's not new. As I said, it's the same process used for nationals of Ukraine and their immediate family members as part of the Uniting for Ukrainian program. So obviously, as the U.S. may open this up to other countries in the future, who knows? They already have the process in place. It's easy to do. Now, here is the process. United States-based citizen or lawful permanent resident should go online to www.uscis.gov and submit Form I-134A, which is the online request to be a supporter and a declaration of financial support on behalf of the named national from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela, or Ukraine, and their immediate family members. You do not need to be their relative. It can be done for a friend. It could even be done for an acquaintance. And you only submit one form for the same person or family. Now, if you've submitted a Form I-134A online before January 6, 2023 under Uniting for Ukraine or the process for Venezuelans, your case will continue to process. They have run out of visas for Ukraine for the year. It's 100,000 for Ukraine. They're fully done. They're starting to back up now for Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua. So it's on first come, first served basis. You do not need to keep filing new ones. No further action is required. Just do one. It's in the system. You have a receipt. Just wait. Do not submit a second form. It's just going to screw up the case completely. And then the individual in the particular country, whether it's Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Cuba, Ukraine, or outside of Ukraine, because Ukrainians may be outside of the country if countries at war, are going to be notified that they have been selected, and there's no interview at the U.S. Embassy. Now, access to this program is absolutely free. Neither the United States supporter nor the beneficiary is required to pay the United States government any filing fees for the Form I-134A. You do not have to pay the U.S. government for participation in this process. However, once the eligible parolee comes to the United States, there will be filing fees for a work permit. There will be filing fees for travel permission. And there may be filing fees if you try to obtain a green card later on after you have arrived. If you have more questions or need help with Haitian, Cuban, Nicaraguan, Venezuelan, or Ukrainian parole, call me. Set up a consultation. 1-800-529-5465. That's 1-800-LAW-LINK, 1-800-529-5465. Now, on February 7th, the Biden administration told the Supreme Court that it has the intent to let the coronavirus public health emergency expire on May 11th, in about 2 months from now. And therefore, it is now moot regarding the ongoing case in the Supreme Court over a Trump-era border protection. In a filing submitted to the High Court, Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar wrote, absent other relevant developments, the end of the public health emergency will, among other consequences, terminate the Title 42 orders and moot this case. Moreover, the government has also recently announced its intent to adopt new Title 8 policies to address the situation at the border once the Title 42 orders end. Now, this background, because that's a Title 42, blah, blah, blah. Let me give you a little background on all of this. The Trump administration invoked Title 42 at the border as a public health emergency that prevented anyone from applying for asylum because the United States government did not want anyone coming to the country with COVID. That's what Trump said. We don't want more COVID in the country. We're going to call a public health emergency. No one could apply for asylum. And it was obviously used to limit asylum at the border because many people traveled by plane to the United States every day, and there was no public emergency for COVID or people traveling by airplane through the airports. So obviously this whole Title 42 was a guise to prevent people from applying for asylum. And the only way people were able to ultimately apply for asylum was jump the fence, go through the wall, enter without inspection, and then apply for asylum. So the whole system is screwed up. So in place of preventing people from applying for asylum at the border because of COVID, the Biden administration is putting in a new rule that was announced on February 21st. All right, so they're ending the Proclamation 42, no more public health emergency. We're not going to prevent people from applying for asylum based on COVID. But now the new rule that they're putting into effect will deny asylum to anybody who shows up at the United States southern border without first seeking protection in a country they pass through. So this new rule means severe limitations on asylum for anyone fearing for their life back home, unless they're already a national of Mexico, because anybody who is not Mexican had to step foot in Mexico in order to get to the border to apply for asylum. And if you step foot in Mexico to get to the border to apply for asylum, under these new rules, you have traveled through a third country to reach the United States. So it's going to basically prevent everybody on the southern border from applying for asylum, even if you jump the fence, go through the fence, dig under the fence. If you entered without inspection through the southern border, you're going to be barred from applying for asylum because you touched ground in Mexico first. They're going to say, apply for asylum in Mexico. So this new rule is almost certainly going to face legal challenges. Donald Trump tried to pass a similar rule in 2019, and it was in appeals courts for years. Now, the new rule proposed by the Biden administration has to go through a 30-day public comment period before it can formally be adopted. If adopted, it will remain in place for a minimum of 2 years. Administration officials expect the rule to take effect on the day the Title 42 authority expires, which is May 11th. The Homeland Security and Justice Departments argued that surging numbers of migrants left them little choice. They anticipate illegal crossings to climb to between 11,000 to 13,000 per day. 11 to 13,000 people jumping the fence, going through the fence, under the fence, if no action is taken on Title 42. So if you entered the country without inspection recently, and if you do enter the country without inspection through the southern border, you're going to be put in removal, and your only choices to win your removal case is apply for asylum within a year, or argue you were paroled into the United States and be married to a U.S. citizen in a bona fide marriage. Those are everybody's choices if they come across the border illegally. But asylum is going to be taken away from you, so you better act fast or you're going to be out of luck. Now, a notice in the Federal Register says the exceptions to the proposed rule will be made for people with an acute medical emergency, imminent and extreme threat of violent crimes such as murder, rape, or kidnapping, being a victim of human trafficking, or other extremely compelling circumstances. Children traveling alone will also be exempted. If you enter the country without inspection, after this rule takes into account, everyone's going to claim, if I go home, I'm going to be murdered, I'm going to be raped, I'm going to be kidnapped. It could be everybody's asylum claim. The rule essentially calls on prospective migrants to follow legal pathways to apply for asylum, such as using Customs and Border Patrol One app while waiting in their home country, through which prospective migrants can schedule an appointment to apply to appear at a border entry point to apply for asylum. Government wants you to stay in your country, download an app, apply for asylum on the app, and when you get called, if you ever get called, then you figure out a way to make it to the border in Mexico. United States officials insist the proposed measure is different from Trump's. Trump said, if you touch ground in Mexico, you can't apply in U.S., no exceptions, mainly because there's room for exceptions, because the Biden administration has made other legal pathways available, and particularly the humanitarian parole for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, Venezuelans, and Ukrainians, which we talked about. And the administration said migrant encounters from those countries have plummeted since the announcement, and you're using it as a model for dealing with immigration in the future. But immigration advocates have criticized attempts to limit asylum applications at the southern border, saying that a migrant's not going to sit in their home country waiting to be called on an application they downloaded on an app. Meanwhile, their life's in danger. They're running for their lives, and they got to wait for months, years, if they ever get called, waiting for it to get called by, Customs and Border Patrol to come to the border. Now, supposedly, I don't know this for a fact, but supposedly what I read in the news is that Costa Rica and Mexico supposedly have, of all of the countries that you would try to, cover in Central America, that Costa Rica and Mexico, which is actually Mexico, it's North America, but anybody south of the border, supposedly has the most robust asylum systems for asylum seekers traveling north. But both countries, however, have been overwhelmed by the surging number of asylum applications in recent years. Now, the new rule comes as President Biden faces Republican-controlled House, determined to make immigration a key issue as they attempt to portray the southern border as completely out of control. So we will see what happens, but I would not personally expect a breakthrough on any significant immigration law changes. I would not expect any breakthrough on any amnesty in the near future. And my expectation is that this new rule that prevents you from applying for asylum after May 11th, if you touch ground in Mexico and you're not a Mexican, it's probably going to go in the courts and be held in abeyance while it makes its way through the court system, which could be years and years. Who knows? We'll see what happens. There's a new OSHA rule that will allow some people to apply for UNT visas as victims of crimes that otherwise would not have been allowed to. On February 13th, the U.S. Occupational Safety and Health Administration announced for the first time that the agency will have the authority to issue visa law enforcement certifications to workers who have had their wages stolen, safety laws violated, or suffered other workplace abuses, regardless of their immigration status. Undocumented workers across the United States who have been afraid to speak up about labor rights violations due to their immigration status have new leverage now to take action against their bosses and obtain a U or T visa. And once they have a U or T visa, workers can be employed legally, assist their family members in obtaining immigration status, apply for public benefits, and have a pathway to permanent resident status. Now, before the announcement, only police, district attorneys, prosecutors, judges involved in a criminal investigation could issue these visa certifications. And what happened is, if you were the victim of a crime, you needed the district attorney, the prosecutor, the judge to say you have assisted in the investigation of this crime. And it was a serious crime. And if you got a law enforcement to give you that certification, that is when you were able to apply for the U or T visa, which gets you work permit, gets you government benefits. Ultimately, once it's approved, you can get a green card 3 years later without being sponsored by anybody. So why this is good, this OSHA thing is good, is now it allows people who were basically not paid what they were supposed to be paid, people who were not paid at all, people who are working in unsafe working conditions, to go to OSHA, which is a federal government agency, let them investigate this, and let them issue the law enforcement certificate that will allow them to then apply for the U and T visa. Kimberly Darby, an OSHA spokesperson, said to fulfill OSHA's mission to ensure safe and healthy workplaces, it is critical that workers, regardless of immigration status, can report unsafe conditions without fear of retaliation. She added that OSHA knows many workers may not report a workplace hazard because of their immigration status or the threat of retaliation. Thanks for watching. For more Brad Show Live, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.